Okay, guys, let's start our first training session on SSAS and MDX. So in last demo class, we discussed about where MSBI fits and where SSAS fits in any data warehousing projects. So just to recap, so you all know that you will be pointing to a data warehouse as source to your SSAS projects, and SSAS sits here, and the output of an SSAS project is again a database. So the source is database for the SSAS projects, and the outcome of the SSAS project is again a database. The only difference is the database, the source database is relational, which is two-dimensional, which will have tables that has rows and columns. Those are the two dimensions of the relational databases. That's why we call two-dimensional. And the output databases are multi-dimensional. These are also called OLAP or multi-dimensional or cubes, okay, whatever the name you call. So why I'm bringing this point, the key thing that you have to get from here is the SSAS projects. If you take, this is your SSAS project. If you take any SSAS project, the first thing that you require is a connection to your data warehouse or the data on which you want to define or design an SSAS project, right? So the first and foremost important thing for SSAS projects is the source connection. The source connection will be to relational databases. In most cases, it will be data warehouse where you will have all the data stored. And the output will be analysis services, or in other words, OLAP databases, which will be multidimensional. So as you all aware of the fact that relational databases can be queried by, let's say, for example, by using SQL. And if you take an example of Microsoft SQL Server, the querying language will be T-SQL, which is Transact SQL. And if you go to Oracle, it will be PL SQL or something like that. Similarly, the querying language, if you want to query what data that is available in the OLAP database, it will be MDX, multidimensional expressions. Now, this is the first thing. So in this session, we're going to discuss about how to set the connection to the sources and what properties we have, what properties we can deal with, and what are the different options we have in the source, and how we read the data from source to the SSAS projects, and how we process it and bring the output of OLAP database. Before going to that, in last session we also discussed about installing the software. So let's say you join a new team, and you got a new machine. How will you know that the software that is required for your work is installed or not? By going to the all programs, you can see what software is installed, or you can go to control panel or anything. There are multiple ways to find out, but the best and the most efficient way of finding what services is installed in your system is to go is by going to services.msc. It's a run command. If you type, it will give you all the services that are installed in your system. Okay, so in the system that is allocated to you or that you are using. In this case, this is the system that I'm using, and I see these services are installed in my machine. And if you go for yes, you will see all the services that are installed with SQL, Microsoft SQL Server related. And you see a lot of junk services which we may not need, or which we may not be discussing as part of this SSAS and MDX training sessions. But the key services here are SQL Server. This SQL Server is we are gonna use it as our data warehouse, the source for our SSAS project. So the SQL Server should be always running for us to work or to try something on SSAS projects. And SQL Server agent, we may not need this. That's why I disabled it. And if you want to start, you can start the service. This is mainly used to automate the schedule the jobs and so on, which is off topic here. And SQL Server analysis services is the most important service that is required for our trainings. And you see this is running. And I have one more instance of the SQL Server analysis services, but this is tabular mode. So from starting from 2012, if I'm not wrong, we have two modes of SQL Server analysis services. One is OLAP and data mining, and the second one is tabular models. So the tabular models are in memory, whereas OLAP is multidimensional. So I installed two softwares, two versions or two instances of analysis services. One instance is one instance is multidimensional, which supports multidimensional projects. That is what we are going to discuss in next 20 odd days. And the other thing is tabular model, which is in-memory model, which is not part of our discussions in this training sessions. And few other we don't need this service to be running. Let me stop this. I think this is customer experience input something CEIP. This is a service which will be running in the background and take some inputs without disturbing your work, and pass it to the Microsoft for customer experience or improvements and so on. And SQL browser, and this is for SQL Server CEIP, and there are a couple of other instances. Even you can, services. Even you can see integration services which is running, which I may not use at all in this training session. So I can stop that. So either you can stop it or you can permanently disable the service. For example, I don't need integration services at all as part of these training sessions, and also in my project, for example. So in that case, instead of stopping, if I stop now I stop the service, but when I restart my machine, the service will be picked up again, because I set the startup type to automatic. Okay. Now, to permanently disable it, you can go to the properties, and you will have an option, startup type to disable, or you can use automatic delayed start, which means your OS will be loaded, but after that the services will be started slowly. Or if you select automatic, all the services will be started as part of your OS loading. And manual means if you set it to manual, it won't start automatically until you go and start it. And if you set it to disable, it's same as manual, but before you try to start manually, you have to change the startup type to either manual or automatic. Let me show you that. For example, if I select manual, I can go and start the service, right? I can click the start and the service will be started. And let me go and set it to disable mode. I hope it works, and you cannot start that. To start the service which is in disable mode, you have to go here, change it to manual, and then start it. That's the only difference between disable and the manual stuff. And if you set it to manual stuff, you can start the services using the third-party scripting languages like PowerShell or Unix shell scripting. You can do that. But if it is disabled, you cannot do that. That's the disadvantage, and that's the difference between manual and disable. Now, as I don't require this service at all, I'll be disabling it, and I leave the rest of the services as is. And if you see the third one, the last column in the services page is log on as, with what ID the service should be running, or using which ID. Like for example, if you see SQL Server analysis services, I'm starting this with the .roope account. If you go to the properties and go to the logon page, it will give you logon as with which account you want to use. You can use either local system account, or you can browse and you can find out whatever the accounts. Like if you're working in an intranet in any company, there will be a lot of systems connected, right? So you can pick any functional account or any account to start the service, and you have to provide the password. Okay. So that is the logon as column here, and the rest of the services you can ignore. These are services related to different things like VLC media player or notepad or whatever that is running in your system. So when you get your system, you better come to the services.msc, go to SQL Server, and make sure that SSAS is running on your server. If it is running on your server, then you're good to go and deploy SSAS projects into this particular server. If you don't have this SSAS instances in this in your computer, even then it's fine. That means you can develop the project, you can finish all the work of the project, and you cannot deploy it. To deploy it, you have to find some other system that is connected in your intranet to deploy the server, to deploy the project. For example, let me go back here and let me take a new. Let's say this is my machine. I'm trying to practice analysis services at home. And I'll have SQL Server in the same machine, I'll have analysis service on the same machine, and I'll create the project in the same machine, and I'll read the data from SQL Server and deploy to the analysis services. So I need to have SQL Server, I need to have analysis services to do end-to-end analysis services practice, right? When I have a when I talk about only the standalone system or the system that I'm having at home, which will be almost standalone. It will not be connected with any other systems. But if you're working in a team, or if you're working for a company for a project, then all the systems are connected through intranet, right? So this is your friend system, this is your friends, this is your friends, and this is your dev server. Dev server means development server. This is your UAT server, user acceptance testing server, and so on. So you don't need to have service in your machine, analysis services. You don't need to have analysis services in your friends' machines. But still, they can start and work. They can start and finish the development of the project. They can create the queue project. They can complete it. But to test it, to deploy it, he has to find any system that has analysis services running and that is connected intranet. Okay, that has connection to your system, right? So all your systems are connected in the company. You will, let's say this is mine. I finish my work, and he finished his work. He finished his work. He is the team lead. Let's say XYZ is the team lead. He get all the code, and he will deploy it to the dev server. So now these guys will connect to the dev server to see whether his changes are there. This guy connects to the dev server to see if his changes are deployed correctly or not. The same way this guy will be. So this service is not required for development, but for deploying we need this service. For example, I can stop this service until I have to deploy that. I can stop this and let's start and do some development. When it comes to the deployment, it's going to fail. Then we can come back and start it. Okay. So this is about the services. So this is the first check that you have to do when you are taken into any project. And the second thing, let's go to the second one, whether you have the client tools or tools that are required to develop your project. The first and foremost thing that you have to see is if your data warehouse is SQL Server, is in SQL Server, or in any data warehouse. To develop the project, you need Visual Studio. To deploy and test, to run the queries and see whether the data is coming correctly or not for testing and all those stuff, you need SQL Server Management Studio. So when you in last session I explained, like if you have that software file, setup file. I think I have it here. Okay, and if you go to the setup file here, after the installation is complete, there will be a couple of links which will direct you to the page where you can download the software that is required for your developing the projects. Install SQL Server Management Tools and install SQL Server Data Tools. SQL Server Data Tools is used here. You can see some information about it. SQL Server Data Tools provides Visual Studio integration, including project system support for Azure's SQL database, SQL Server Database Engine, reporting services, analysis services. This is key for us, and integration services. Okay, and similarly, SQL Server management tools or SQL Server management. If you install this, you can query it and you can see what is deployed and whether it's deployed correctly or not, whether the data is coming correctly or not. So all those kind of things can be validated or verified using the SQL Server Management Studio. Now, let's see how we can find out whether the required tools are installed in our system. If you look for Visual Studio, you should have any version which is compatible with the version of your analysis services. We installed SQL Server 2016, and Visual Studio 2015 is compatible with that, so I installed 2015. So this is the tool that I'm going to use, or this is the client that I'm going to use to develop all analysis service projects as part of this training. And this is a normal Visual Studio, which you use for .NET projects as well as SQL projects and integration reporting projects. And if you go to the new and select project, you see multiple options. What are the project templates that are installed as part of this Visual Studio installation? You see SQL Server projects, you see analysis services, integration services, reporting services, and I don't think I have .NET related stuff. That's why I do have only business intelligence related stuff. That's what I want, so I installed only business intelligence related stuff. This is, I mean, the latest versions, we call it as SQL Server Data Tools. Earlier we were calling it as Visual Studio. Okay. Now, the other client that is required for our sessions is SQL Server Management Studio. Short form is SSMS. Let me type SSMS and it'll give you here Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. I have version 17. So this is the place where you can query your relational databases as well as multidimensional databases. So relational databases is nothing but SQL database in SQL Server, whereas multidimensional is nothing but analysis service database. And once the pop-up wizard shows you opens, you can select either the database engine or analysis service engine. So if you connect to the database engine, it will take you to your relational databases of SQL Server. If you connect to analysis services engine, it will take you to your and OLAP databases. And similarly, you can connect to your reporting services as well as integration services, which will give you about your reports that you have, as well as integration packages, what is running, what is scheduled, and so on, blah, blah, more information about integration services. Now, let's stick to the database engine as well as and analysis services engine. First, let's see database engine. Database engine, you can connect to any database, SQL Server database engine, using two kinds of authentication. One is Windows, another one is SQL. And if you select Windows authentication, you don't need to provide ID and password for this, and it will by default take the the Windows that which you logged in. And when you select the SQL Server authentication, you have to pass your user ID as well as password. If you don't pass the right ID and password as usual, you can't connect to the database engine. And the key thing here is the server name. The server name is nothing but the system name or the server, the host name plus instance name. Generally, if you see, host in the sense, host is nothing but a computer or server. For example, this is your host. A host can have n number of instances. SQL Server 1, SQL Server 2, SQL Server 3, SQL Server 4. So what will the server name is? The host name, comma, your or slash your instance name. So I do have only one instance, the default instance on the SQL Server for SQL Server. How can you say that I have only one instance of SQL Server? You can say that by seeing the services that are available in my system. If I go to services again, you see only one SQL Server instance is available, and that too default instance. MS SQL Server, we call it as default instance. So the default instance name is MS SQL Server. If you just specify your host name, it will try to connect to the default instance always. If you don't specify any host name, okay? it will connect to the default instance. Similarly, if you go to analysis services, you do have I do have two sets of instances. One is default instance, MS SQL Server is the name, and another one is an instance with the name tabular. I've given the name of the instance as tabular just because I install the analysis services in tabular mode. Okay. So now let's try to connect to the host. Either you can give the host name, or you can give the dot, or you can give the local host. All are one and the same if the host is your local system. If it is a system in your network, then you have to give the host name for sure. So let me select this. This is my host name, and if I try to connect, it's connected, and I can see all the databases that are available. And you see the SQL Server agent is disabled, and that's why I cannot see anything related to the SQL Server agent, any jobs that are configured or whatever that is available in the SQL Server agent. Now, let me quickly start SQL Server agent. It's not a major one. So I started it, and I'm here. I refreshed it, and I see my SQL Server agent is available now, up and running. So if you want to see the jobs, and if you want to work with the jobs, SQL Server agent jobs, to configure or to schedule any package runs or anything of the sort, or running any partial scripts for every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, any scheduled jobs, then you need to have this SQL Server agent job running, service running. Else, we are not going to use that. You can just simply stop this service. If you stop the service, you will not be able to see what's there in the SQL Server agent, and you will not be able to use that. And now, under databases, it will show you what are the databases that are available, the relational databases. And I restored Wide World Importers Data Warehouse. I've given link for this database to you guys, which you can restore and play or practice your analysis service topics. So both are one and the same. I don't need two databases. I'm going to delete one. Similarly, let's connect to the analysis services instance. So if you see, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio plays a major role in the development work. Like, for example, if you want to see what tables are available in your data warehouse, which will be sourced to your analysis service project, you need to have SQL Server Management Studio, which will make your work easy. If you execute a new query, you can see what tables are available, or by expanding here and go to the tables, you can select, like for example, fact sales table, and running a select statement. As this is off topic for us, I'm not going to cover much on SQL. This is how you can see what data is available and how many records are there and what columns are available. So in a particular table in your data warehouse. This is our data warehouse for our trainings. Now let's connect to the other part of it, other one, analysis services. I can go to analysis services, connect. Here, if you see, I told you it's a host name and instance name if you have multiple. I also showed you there are multiple instances for analysis services. One is default instance. By the name, you can say it is default instance. MS SQL Server is the default. And other one is tabular instance. So the tabular instance, you can, if I don't give anything except the host name, it will go and connect to the default instance. It's saying the service is not running. Did I miss anything? Yep, the service is off. That's why it's not connecting. So let me connect. Let me start the service. Now I can connect to the analysis services, and it gives me what all databases that are deployed, analysis services databases that are deployed to the server in my local machine. Just now the service is started, and that's, this is a known thing, not responding mode in Microsoft products. Okay, here you see I created one sample demo project in last session. So I named it as My Bad. It's really, and this is the database that I created, and it will not have any tables like relational database. You see here it has tables, whereas here it will be having cubes and dimensions. So we'll be discussing a lot about these cubes and dimensions in coming sessions. So now let me connect to one more analysis service instance. This time I'm specifying the name of it, MSSQL Server instance name, and let me connect. I don't know why. Let me give the other one named instance. Okay, this is taken. I have to see what is the exact name. I'll try that later. So if you see, the difference between the multidimensional and the tabular model is, by the way, once you connect to the instance, you can see the icon here. The icon says it's a cube, right? And here the icon is more like an Excel sheet or something. This means this analysis services is installed in tabular mode. This analysis services is installed in OLAP mode. So that's the difference. And if you see here the databases, I created one lucky day, and you will not have anything like cubes, dimensions, and all here. It's only tables, set of tables. That's what I created, and so that's the difference. And this is an in-memory model, as I mentioned before, and this is off topic for us, but I'm just showing you how the instance works, instance name works. And remember one thing, where if you know that SQL Server is always, it can be Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication, and analysis services is always Windows authentication. There is no SQL Server authentication for analysis services. People try to trick you. Like if I select analysis services, if I try to connect analysis services with SQL Server authentication mode by giving my ID and password, what's going to happen? People try to trick you in interview questions. So keep in mind that analysis services is Windows authentication. Now let's have a quick look at where the data or where the files or where the tables or what the databases will be stored. For example, if you see the SQL Server, if you go to the properties, you see a path, and if you go to the path, you see SQL Server related stuff is installed here. The data is the place where you will have all the data related, all the databases like TempDB, master database, worldwide importers, DW under in memory, and data files, blah blah blah. So all the LDF files. LDF means log data file, and MDF means main data file, and NDF is next data file. When the TempDB reaches its max limit, then it creates an NDF. See here, it is creating NDF, NDF, NDF. I have to change the, I think max limit to be extended or increased once once it's reached to the maximum. So similarly, if you go to Microsoft SQL Server, you'll have SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, the default instance, it is MSAS, which means analysis services, and MSAS, which is tabular instance. Okay, and like that, you can create n number of instances. If you want to create 20 instances, you can create 20 instances. But the only problem is your system should support it. Let's say if you take your laptop with a 2 GB RAM or 8 GB RAM max and with 500 gig of space, and if you create 200 instances of analysis services, it will not support. You need to have space to install at first place. While installing, it will give you it will tell you how much space you require for the software to be installed. And also, after creating the instance, all the other system metrics like CPU and all should be good to support it. And finally, you need to have space to create the projects and store the cubes. Let's say, for example, a cube database will be 100 gig. You can have hardly 2 instances or 3 instances max if your system supports 1 terabyte of, if your system has only 1 terabyte of disk space. So you have to keep all these metrics into consideration while going for the number of instances, multiple instances in your system. In your personal laptop, I would recommend max 2 instances. If you go for more than 2, your system will suffer because it requires a lot of system resources. It eats the system resources like CPU, memory, threads, and all. Okay. And if you go to the first instance, the default instance, it is OLAP. And if you go to OLAP, you have backup. If you take backup of any analysis service database, by default, it will be pointing to this location. And bin is general bin, which will where you'll have all the DLLs or anything that is required for the analysis services. And if you go for config, you'll have your config file, which is key, which says, or which is key for to start your analysis services. For example, if you don't have this file, then you cannot start your service. And if you go to this file, this will have a lot of one second, let me open it in Notepad. This will have all the information about your service. It's saying I don't have permissions, I have to be owner of it. So before the session ends, the training session ends, I'll try to show you. This is the admin work. If you work as OLAP admin, you have to work with all these files. So this MSMDSRV file will have where the backup folder is, where the data folder is, where the cube folder is, all the folders information, and also all the properties that are related to your analysis services. When I say properties, if you go here, right click, and if you go to the properties on the server, you can see some set of properties. All this properties information will be there in the MSMDSRV file. That is why it is very, 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 very important file. If that file is corrupt, you cannot start your analysis services. And this is just set of key properties. You will have more properties. If you select this show advanced or all properties, you can see all the properties. We will discuss about few important properties when in the coming sessions. Not all are important. For example, if you see data mining, it has a lot of properties which is not important for us, right? Similarly, we will have a lot of unwanted, properties like predictive analytics. We'll discuss all the important properties at server level in the next sessions. So if you delete this file, you cannot delete when the server is running. And if you delete this file, then it's not gonna start the server. And also remember, whenever the service starts or whenever we restart the services, or it periodically it takes the backup of the file. It maintains one backup and it maintains one INI file. The INI file is the one which drives your service always. And data is where your cubes information will be. MyBad is the database name, and this is the XML file of MyBad. Everything will be in XML. I'll explain that later. And similarly, you'll have a couple of other folders, temp folder or log folder, where you will have all the logs information, like what is happening on your server, whether Rupesh is running something or Charan is running something, querying something. Everything will be logged here. Whatever is happening on the server will be logged here. This is key for database administrators, not for developers, but still we will go and look into that as part of our training sessions. Once you get familiar with analysis service concepts, then we will look into that. And finally, temp folder, if it has to calculate something or if it has to process something, it will use this temp folder to keep the temporary data, temporary files, whatever, and it will erase afterwards. So this is the temp folder which analysis services uses to do its job. So these are the key things and major things for us. And similarly, the tabular model, the other instance, will have its own stuff like data. You'll have one my lucky day or something I created, the database, similar structure, OLAP-wise structure and everything. But this is not important for us for these sessions, I'm saying. So if you can see this video or this recording session again and again, and if you get familiar with what we discussed so far, like seeing how can you find out which service is running and how can you find out whether the required tools are available in your system or not to start your work, then half of the tension will be gone. Like the first and the most important thing is whether I have the required tools to work on. If you're new to the technology and if you're new to the project, then you'll be like worrying about whether you have a required software or where to start and how to start. The first thing is to check whether you have required client tools and whether you have required services and whether the services are running or not. So as mentioned, let me stop the service and we'll go and start with SSAS project development. So the first and foremost thing is you need to have Visual Studio to start your SSAS projects. And once you open the Visual Studio, go to the new project, and under analysis services, there are multiple options to select. The first one is analysis services multi-dimensional and data mining project. This is what we will be using. And the second one is import from server multi-dimensional and data mining project. And third thing is analysis service tabular project, off topic. Import from Power Pivot, off topic. Import from server tabular, off topic. So this is a key thing. This is very important when you want to debug some issues or issues in the production servers or in UAT servers. So I'll be explaining about this in later sessions. But let's start with analysis services multi-dimensional and data mining project. So once I select the project, I have to give the name. I named the project as SSAS training, and it's saying whether you want to have the same solution name. Yes. Create a directory for solution. Yes. I'll show you what will happen if I choose that option. And if I select OK, it is creating the templates and the project template, basically what is required for the project. And if I go to the folder that is showing, you can see SSAS training, a project is created. Under that, a project file is created. Under that, the default files that are required to start analysis service project is loaded. And here you see solution file is created with the name that I have given, SSAS training. And now let's start this. The first, let's see the folders that we have in an analysis services solution explorer. The solution explorer is where you will have all the files and folders that are related to this particular project. It basically contains the project information. You can have multiple projects or single project, but the solution explorer is the place where you will have all the information. And if you see, this is the solution, this is the project name, this is the solution name, this is my project, SSAS training. Under that, I have few folders. Each folder has its own importance. The first thing is data sources. Second one is data source views. Third thing is cubes, dimensions, mining structures, and roles, assemblies, and miscellaneous. We will be discussing about everything except mining structures because this is off topic for us. I can give you a brief about mining structures, but we will look more into the remaining folders here. If you still remember, let me go back to the paint. I clearly mentioned the first and foremost thing that is very important for us is to set up the connection to your data warehouse where you have data that will be used by analysis services to create analysis services databases like cube databases. So that is why the first thing in the project is to set up the connection. You cannot do any key things like working on data source views or cubes or dimensions or mining structures or roles without creating a data source. Now let's see how to create a data source here. Right click, new data source. It gives you some brief about what is this wizard about. This wizard is about creating a new data source. And if I don't like to see the page again and again, so I always opt this one. Click on next and create a data source based on another object or create a data source based on existing or new connection. So I'm selecting this. If I select, I'll explain the other one too. So create a data source based on an existing or a new connection. So these are the existing connections, or I can go for a new connection. So these are the connections used by me in my last training sessions, or when I was practicing, or when I was learning, or when I was doing something. Or you can go to new and type your server name. Don't go for this when you are in when you are in intranet. It will go to all the servers. You see, it's going to not responding more, though it is standalone, right? But the good thing is to type the server name. But unfortunately, I selected this. Okay, and it's asking me whether it's a Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication. I can go for Windows because I opted for both. In few cases, in few projects, they will not opt for Windows authentication. It will be only SQL Server authentication. So keep in mind, if it is SQL Server authentication, you have to give your username and password and save the password for future for the processes, queue processing. And you have to select the database, or you can type the database. I can't type it, so I'm selecting the database. Or attach a database file you can go for. So if you have a database file, then you can go and attach it, which is a very bad idea, and I don't prefer it at least. It's always good to connect to the server and the database file. And test connection. If the connection is succeeded, then click on OK. Your connection is created worldwide, import as DW. Click on next, or you can directly click on finish. If you click on next, it will ask you, it will take you to very important page. So this is so important because all the processing is dependent on this page. So when I say processing, you have to read the data. If you see this page again, I mentioned that it reads the data from here and it writes the data to a different database in a different format, right? So for reading and for loading the appropriate providers and all, this impersonation page plays a major role. Impersonation page decides what account it has to take to go and talk to the SQL Server connection or any connection that you have given, right? For example, here I've given a worldwide importers from my local.
Hi Rupesh, I am not seeing our screen. Just now your power gone.
Okay, there was some interruption. Sorry for that. So if you see the connection string, to connect to this particular database, what credentials it has to talk, what kind of credentials it has to use to load the providers and to talk and to read the data from this database if you have selected Windows authentication. Now, Windows authentication is fine as long as both the SQL Server and my analysis services on the same machine. When these are sitting in the different machines, then it needs to have an account to talk to the SQL Server. Windows account doesn't work if the two services, SQL as well as analysis services, are sitting in two different machines. So for that, this impersonation plays a major role. So what you need to do is you need to specify what account has access to the database. And if both are sitting in the same machine, then you can go for service account, or it's better to go for the password and ID. And let me explain different options we have here. The first one is password and username and password. So when you give username and password, for example, we are 10 members working in a team. If I give some XYZ ID and his password, then that means he should have access to the database and his ID. In general, we use functional accounts here. Functional account is the one which will have access to the databases. Functional account is not one person's account or one person's ID or username in the system, in the company. It's functional ID, which is used for connecting to the databases and production. In different environments. In general, people go for functional accounts here. And the second option is use service account. When you opt for this, it will go and it will look into your services and it will come here and it will see what is the service account that is used to run the service. This account will be taken to talk to the database. So this account should have access to the SQL Server database. So that is the option, use the service account. Most of the cases, if you have both in the same system, use service account will work fine. And the third option is use the credentials of the current user. The person who logged in into the system, that guy's ID and password will be taken by default if you select this. There is not much difference between this and this. The only difference is here it's a defaulted to the current user who logged in, and here you can pass any ID and password. And the fourth one is inherit. You are telling the analysis services server that for the data source, for the connection, inherit the user ID and password, the impersonation settings from its parent. So if you see here, the parent, this is the data source. The parent of this one is the project, the database. So the database will have its own impersonation settings. I'll show you. Remind me this when we deploy the project, okay? So the database will have its own impersonation. So inherit it from there. And if you go there you will have again same set of options. Whatever the option is set over there will be inherited and used in the data source. Then what is the use of it? Why I need to go for this round trip? Like, okay, go and inherit from here. Let me show you that if I can. Databases. My bad, is the database I've created. Oh my God, I stopped the server again. So let me start it real quick. Let me refresh once because the server just now started. Okay, still refreshing. Yeah. Okay, this is my bad database. And if you see impersonation, data source impersonation info, if you open this, it has its own set of settings. Okay, use a specific Windows username and password, use a service account, use the credentials of the current user, and default. And default will be the default. I think I don't remember what account it will take, and it will be taken a default account. So I'll tell you what the default account is. So what will happen if I select inherit here is, it will go and look for what is the impersonation setting set here. Let's say, for example, if I set service account here, then this service account will be applied. This is a database level, remember. If you see here, I went to the database and properties. This is where the impersonation setting, this is at the database level. So these settings will be inherited to this particular data source, whatever I'm going to create. If I click on next, worldwide importers, let me finish. This is the first data source I created. Whenever this data source try to pull the data, it will go to the database, SSAS database, and it will get the connection settings, sorry, impersonation settings, and it will use that impersonation to connect to the database. It's a round trip. Why we need that? Why we need to go for this round trip? The only advantage or the main advantage is, let's say you have 10 data sources created and everything is set to inherit by default, and it will be one place where you can make the changes. If you make changes here, it will apply to all the 10. You see the advantage? Or if I come back here and make the changes to service account, again it will be applied to all the connections that are all the data sources that is having the impersonation method selected as inherit. So for example, if I can copy and paste it with a new name. Again, I can paste it with a new name. Again, I can paste. I can create connections, but this is a waste case scenario. People don't create the same connection again and again. But I'm telling you an example. All are selected as inherit. So all the for all these data sources, the impersonation information will be inherited from the impersonation information that is set at database level, whatever we have here. So that is the advantage of having inherit. But for our demo, we don't need this. It's just this is the least used test case or scenario. So let's go for our regular stuff. Edit. This is all good. And impersonation, let me go with service account. I've just given you an idea about what is the use of this option and how it goes. you can use or you cannot. I mean, it depends on you. But in general, we go with only 1 or 2 data sources max. We will not have many data sources in analysis service projects. So this will be good. So now I created one and I can edit it. And it's showing what is the driver, what is the provider, what is the server name, and so on. I can edit it. Okay. And everything looks good. Now, let me copy and paste. I created one more data source. Here, the same set of things are copied, right? I can either use this way or I can create a data source by pointing reference. Create a data source based on another object. If I click on next, it will show you what are all the objects that are created in the project already. So let me select data warehouse, the first data source that I've created. Okay. Next, I've given the service account, next, and finished. So 2 new data sources are created. One is just by copy and paste. Another one is by giving reference to this, right? So when I do copy and paste, it will copy and paste the same settings as is with a new name. If you observe this part clearly, maintain a reference, this is not checked and this is all good. If you go to the next one, this is checked, this is disabled because I've given reference to worldwide importers data source, data warehouse. So whatever the connection string that is given or whatever the database that I'm connecting in the worldwide importers dw.ds will be referenced in this one, and it will be using the same connection. In all the 3 cases is the same connection. The only difference, the second one is referenced. So if I go here and change it, if I change the connection string, let's say if I change it to master, the second one will not be changed to master because we copied and pasted it. It will remain the same. But the third one is a reference. It will be referencing to the same first one, world importers DW, right? So this connection will be pointing to master now because the reference to connection is pointing to the master database. So if you want to have same connection to multiple, same database connection to multiple data sources, then you can use reference. This is a very rarely used use case. More than this, there is something else which is used. If you have multiple analysis service projects, okay, you can add another project to add new project and add an analysis service project. And let me name it. I have not given a name. So I have 2 projects in one single solution, right? So in this case, I can create a new data source, create a data source based on another object, click on next. It will not. It has these objects, okay? Or you can select the project name. So it is going to the SSAS training. Oh, sorry, it's connecting to analysis service project. So here, if you go here, and if your project is referencing here, and if you select service account, if you finish it, now 2 different projects, 2 different multidimensional projects under one umbrella of SSAS training solution will be pointing to the wide world importers DW. If I change it here, it will be changed here too. So that is the only advantage, and you can imagine how rarely this will be used, right? So let me delete this. I don't want this project. That is about the data sources. The data source is key for setting the connection to the data warehouse from where you will be, or on top of which you will be creating your SSAS project. Okay, that's about the data sources. The key thing, it's one-time setup. Like you will not be creating data sources every hour or every 15 minutes or every week or every month. It will be one-time setup to your underlying data warehouse, and that's it. That's done. One-time setup, and you'll be all good to add or modify anything in your cube projects. Now, the second thing and the most important thing, most important thing for creating the SSAS projects is data source views. The data source views plays a major role. If you have a very good data source view, the rest of the work will be easy. Or cube designing, no, at least it will make your work easy. Compared to having a bad data source view design, if you have a good data source view design, your work, it will reduce a lot of headache for you, and it will make your work little easier in designing your cube. Now, um, let me create a small data source view real quick. Here it gives you some brief about what is this data source view. A data source view provides a simple connection to the data source provides a simple connection to the relational database. Use a data source view for more advanced features such as caching metadata, adding relationships, creating calculations, and setting logical keys. All these four are beautiful options. Setting logical keys. If your system, if your data warehouse or underlying database does not have any primary key, you can define it here. This will not go back to your underlying database or data warehouse. This will be sticked to your analysis service project without making any changes to your underlying database. When I say underlying database, the one on which we will be building our analysis service project. In our case, this is the one. Let's say you have a table without a primary key. If you use this table here, you can create a primary key on this side. This primary key will be sticked only to the analysis service project. It will not be reflected here. No, it will not be reflected. Okay. So that's those kind of advantages, like creating calculations or adding relationships. You can do some beautiful things using the data source view. If you click on next, as usual, I don't want to see this again. Click on next. It's asking me which data source I have to use. Here is the funny thing. As I said, data source is the key thing. Let's say I don't have any data source created. And if I want to create a data source view, here the first screen itself is create a data source. It's not taking me anywhere until I create a data source. If I select this option, it will open the same page or same wizard that opens when I right click and select a new data source. So data source is the first thing. You have to go for it. Next and finish. And now you can see it enabled. So a data source is created, and data source that is available to use for creating a data source view. And click on next. When I click on next, it will show you all the tables. What are all the tables that are there in the system, in the database that you have pointed in your data source. And you can use this option to filter, or if you go back, there is another option where you can restrict few schemas. Like for example, if I select fact, if I go to next, it is showing only the tables that has the fact schema. Let's say I have 10 different schemas in my database, and I'm creating a cube on by using the tables of one particular schema. So then I can filter that schema and I can get all the tables into my system, right? Here, let me remove this. I want every table. Okay, click on next. Now it's showing everything. And this is my fact table. I want, let's say, I want to see sales by country or city, whatever. Now, once you select this button is to insert, include the object. This button is to exclude the object. Whatever is selected here, that will be included. Whatever is selected here, that will be excluded. If you want to include everything, you can use this. If you want to exclude everything, you can use this. And this is for filter. Like for example, sale. This is what I want to include. And if you check this, it will show all the system objects. Generally, you'll get some views and all system objects, you know, right? System views. You'll get all those things, but these are not of much use. So, I'm just showing you the option that we have here. And the beautiful option here is add related tables. If your underlying database is having relationship to any of the table to this fact table, then it will give you that. So sales table has relationship to these 5 tables. And now if I select these 5 tables and select it again, it will bring all the tables that has relationship to these any one of these 5. And if I select these 5 again and select this, okay, that's how it will continue to go. It will add if there is any table until the end. If you go, it will bring all the tables that has at least some relationship, at least relationship to any one table in the above list here, right? This is interesting one. I love this option. So now let me go back, go to sales, and let me keep it simple for understanding and add related tables. One set of tables has been pulled, which are having direct relationship to the sale fact table. Click on next, give some good name for this one, click on finish. That creates your data source view, and you can see a beautiful star on your screen. Is it created or still creating? You see a beautiful star, right? So central table is sale, which is your fact table, and all the related tables are sitting on all the sides of the central table. So this star is what we call as star schema, the most commonly heard term in data warehousing projects. So your data source view, the key thing is what schema you're going to pick for your data warehousing project or your analysis service project. This is one of the most commonly used schema, that is star schema. Similarly, we have snowflake schema, we have starflake schema, we have a galaxy schema, and I can name one schema too. My name, Rupesh schema. So if I come up with some concept like relationship, different relationship, then I can go with my name too. So the most commonly used is star and snowflake, and among those two, star is widely used schema. Which means why? Because the performance will be very good if you go with star schema, and that is why a lot of people, while defining their data warehouses, they'll try to bring star schema instead of snowflake schema. So we will talk about this beautiful star schema and snowflake schema and multiple or many options that we have on the right click here, as well as on the right click of the column, on the table, and on the relationship, everything in the next session. So we're gonna have fun on that. Fun with data source views in the next session. See you in next class. Thank you guys.